Thanks everyone for coming, and welcome to PWA London. I'm Davy. I'm CTO at Toaster. We're a digital agency that creates things with tech, with emerging tech. And one of the emerging techs that we use quite a lot is PWAs, hence why we put this meetup on. We have a fantastic lineup today. Some really good speakers. Fortunately, one of our speakers has dropped out, so we're not going to have any a talk on the pre-act CLI. But I know a little bit about it. If you want to come and chat later, I'll happily talk about that. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Okay. Right. So, who's in the room then? So, hands up if you're a developer. Oh, that's good. That's a lot of developers. Nice. Got any marketers in here? Nice. Strategists? Yes. Lovely. Cool. I don't know who else will be here. Seems good. Any finance directors in the room? I don't know. There we go. So, who knows what PWA stands for? Lovely, lovely. Nice. Just checking. So, has everybody used a PWA? Everybody used one tonight? Yeah. The Tamagotchi app that you're all using earlier was a bona fide PWA. If you check it on Lighthouse, it will score 100 for PWA. Hopefully, maybe. Now, has anyone built a PWA before? Ooh, that's good. That's good. Nice to know. So, just checking who's in the room. That's great. Now, I'm going to have to do a two-handed thing, but I should be able to manage. So one of the things I'm going to touch on is what's changed since our last PWA London. Who was here for the previous one? Nice. Don't worry, I will stop with the audience participation pretty soon. But, yeah. When I say PW, you say no. Okay. Best not. So, what's new? So quite a few things have changed recently. I think one of the biggest things for me, it hasn't actually changed quite yet, but iOS is just put out a new version of their operating system, 12.2. Now this has a whole slew of new features for PWAs. Some fantastic stuff, changes in the app's lifecycle. Like this seems like such a small case, but actually I think it's going to change PWAs quite a bit, especially on iOS. If anyone who doesn't know, if you're on iOS and you have a PWA installed and you want to do the app switching fun, when you come back to your PWA, it reloads, and it's an absolute nightmare. They apparently have fixed that. There's a great article by Maximilian Flettman over here, which I'm sure everyone's read anyway. But it's a great article talking about what's new, what's good, what's bad, and maybe what's not, what they're unsure about. Now, there's some things that's changed in iOS 12.2, which it's quite controversial, really. So, if you have a mobile website or a PWA, you will now no longer get default access to the sensors. So you won't be able to access accelerometers, other interesting censored things like that, and it'll be disabled by default. And there's no request API, so we're not going to be able to ask for that. Now, from a web developer's point of view, I'm like, whoa, what's going on now? But the realities of it are that there's been some bad dudes who've managed to work out how to fingerprint a browser just by your motion of your phone. So you can do tracking without your knowledge. So my first instinct is to be like, no, this is terrible iOS, what you're doing. Maybe it is a good idea. And it maybe is a feature that might come more prominent with new browsers and going forward. Luckily, they might have some people from the Chrome team in here, so we can maybe ask them a question later to see if there's any movement on that. Yeah. So I think that's my top things. But also, PWAs are allowed in the App Store now, in the Google Play Store, which is fantastic. So this is the web platform is becoming a bona fide, real platform. So it's not iOS, it's not Android. First class citizen, Android, iOS, the web platform. Definitely is. moving definitely in the right direction. Now, the actual implications of this, it's a little bit more time consuming than I would expect. Like you think it's PWA, you could just put a URL somewhere and boom, it's in the Play Store. There's a little bit more to it. It uses something called the Trust Web Activity, TWA. Now, you still have to make an Android app through Android Studio. You still have to go through that rigmarole. It doesn't quite support the web app manifest, that kind of stuff. So there's a few little things which you might be a little bit unexpected. Again, I wonder if I could grill someone from the Chrome team. Maybe we will. But yeah, I think those are the kind of big things for me, which have happened recently in the PWA landscape. So this is what we're looking like today. So intro, that's me. It'll be done soon, don't worry. Next, we have a PWA case study. Now, you don't often expect ASDA to be at places like this, or at Tech Talk, but George at ASDA, which is the clothing brand, is a bona fide PWA. So we've got the product manager from ASDA who's going to come and talk about the fun he had creating that, which should be fun. Then we have a tech deep dive, which is slightly generic, worryingly vague. But we have Sam from Google talking about that, which would be great. And then we're not going to ask questions, open up for questions at the end of each talk. What we'll do is we'll get everyone up on stage, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A with everyone involved, and also maybe a few of the members of the Chrome team and the developer relations will come up and help us out. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage Natasha and Perry.
I'll take this. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Natasha, and I work as a web consultant here at Google. Most of the partners that I work with are retailers and, frankly, spend a lot of money in Google advertising. And I work a lot more on the commercial side. So if I speak with web developers and they want to build a business case internally, they like PWA, but there's no resource or nobody cares the company about the website. So trying to get that attention as high up and get these teams able to have resource to do it is kind of my role. And then I have more technical counterparts like Antoine in the back who help when we really get into the weeds to actually build the progressive web app. Also accelerated mobile pages and a handful of other things performance related. So if you are in this room and you already have a Google contact or know some of my teammates, you can look around. Googlers, raise your hand. People in the back. So chat with us if you want to open a conversation and see how we can partner. And specifically, Sam is on our DevRel team, and he's seeking anybody developing an e-commerce PWA, and he's working on a lot of documentation and looking for a partnership on that. And one example of how we've worked with one of our retailers to launch a great progressive web app with one of my technical counterparts, Boyan, is one of our superstars, Perry. So there you go.
Thank you. I need 3 hands for this. I asked for 6 cue cards, and they've given me these. There's not that much content, I wouldn't worry. I'm just going to have to try and balance that. But so what I'm going to do today for you guys is, I know there's a lot of developers in the room, so you may or may not care, but I've got a slot, so we'll just see what we can do with it. But I'm going to talk for you today the bit of the journey we went on from getting the progressive web app in play with our stakeholders, what we've done, what we're going to do, and sort of the reactions and results that we've got there. So first off, it's guys, we need a PWA. This happened in around 2016 on our side. As the product managers and our strategists, we kind of got together and said, what's the next step? Everyone wants an app all the time. The directors, we need an app. Why? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of resource. When you can simply have a progressive web app, this is new technology. So when I sort of say PWA to the stakeholders, like, what is this? We've got so many acronyms. I mean, it's like, we've integrated AMP with PWA to use UA, PN, and for CX. It's just a bit crazy, really. So one thing that one of the selling points here with the PWA is it's indexed by Google. It bypasses the marketplace. You don't need those big updates that our sort of grocery counterparts have to do on their applications. It's your website. It works offline, which everyone was very surprised about. Like, how will it work without 4G? But it's a learning for everyone. You can send push notifications, which I'll actually share with you guys later on how we did with push notifications, which is a great story for us working with Urban Airship. And also you can integrate AMP. AMP is just the super fast page. The page is loading under a second, which I'll give you some more results on as well as we go into it. But all of these things together, making a PWAMP, is what we'll go to. It's a great word. Actually, so I forgot to touch on the main part. And then also this lovely diagram here. The focus for the business is, okay, we understand what it is, but what's the customer going to get from this? How much is it going to cost me to do? And how long is it going to take to deliver? So this is something I'll touch on as we go through. So your business case is what? Why should we give you money to do a PWA? Well, we get 70% of our traffic comes through on mobile, 30% on desktop. And the difference in conversion is 78%. So our business is constantly saying, how can we push the metric? How can we increase conversion to get in line with desktop? It's not that simple. It's customers are shopping, they're browsing on their phones, they're going home, then they're checking out on their desktop while they're watching Corrie, they're on their laptop or whatever they're doing. So we need to bridge the gap. So of course, our metrics for a PWA are in revenue, add to home screen, visitors. There's a lot of metrics that you actually get from your standard website that are kind of fitted in. But what are the key metrics that we had to focus on to get this done was mind the gap. We want to close down that gap in conversion to really bring the experiences in line to make it so no matter what device you shop on, you're getting the same experience. It's consistent, it's fast, and it's reliable. So how do we do this? This is the baseline progressive web app checklist. So obviously some of you guys, or most of you guys may have seen this or read it, which is found on this link, which I'm sure you guys will be able to see after. Some of the simple requirements. The beauty of the PWA is most of these items on this list are kind of, you should expect them from your website anyway. So site is served over HTTPS. We should all be serving our site over HTTPS. It's kind of a basic best practice. So this is the challenge we had to face. All app URLs load while offline. The metadata for the add to home screen. Fast load on 3G, which is just a pain. It's such a pain because everything's changing all the time. It's never, you do it once the next day, you're back to square one. But that's one of the big ones. And also page transitions. So trying to get your website to feel like an app. So not having a clunky page load where the footer comes up, it goes down again, and it's not very great. So those were the things we had to focus on at George to try and push through the PWA to make it work. The project timeline. So in doing that, these were actually the stories that we had for the PWA written up for the dev team to complete. The timeline here was April to June, and we could tick off 3 out of 4 of those items on that previous slide, all except the first load on even 3G. So there was 3 spikes, so we had to do some investigation. We have to get the teams to understand what it is, how it's going to work, and then actually do the work within the sprint itself. This wasn't the beast. When I showed this to the directors, it was easy, it was simple. 11 days, that's fine, we can get it in, it's going to work. However, the timeline for site speed is a different story. Over the last 3 years, we have sort of 1,902 high-level estimates, days of work. We've spent 281 of those on site speed, so 15% of our total capacity has been on trying to improve speed, getting every metric, TTFMP, first load visually complete, time to interactive, all of these metrics low as possible so that our site is stupidly fast, the fastest. And the work paid off. In 2017, we actually got the fastest UK retailer site from somebody that slipped my mind, which is really annoying because it's a great thing. But hard work pays off. But then the next year, we were like 9th on the list because we weren't continually focusing on this and making sure that our site is, it's fast. Speed is king. I don't know if you guys seen some of the research. 1 second of site speed can be worth up to 5% of revenue. And, if your site loads in over sort of 3 seconds, customers are probably going to leave it. And that's not an app-like experience. If you want an app-like experience through the progressive web app, you need to make sure it's fast and seamless. So how did it do? I mentioned earlier that there is a 78% difference in conversion between our 2 device types, which it's massive. It's a big one. The results of it, where we reduced that to 25% by enabling our PWA. So for the customers who are shopping the PWA versus our mobile browsing experience, the difference is massive. I actually asked my analytics team this morning if they could update me on the stats. So I didn't put it in the slides, but I've got it in a lovely piece of paper. It's everyone's dream. You know, when you go to your analysts and say, how's something doing? How's this doing? And they come back and they give you something that's just green. It's just, thank God for that. So some of the stats real quick that we've got here. Our average revenue per visit, again, this is versus our PWA versus mobile browsing customers. Average revenue per visit is up 50%. Average order value is up 5%. Items per order up 15%. So we're selling more products of a higher selling price just because of these customers who have got the PWA present on their device. I think I read some research or heard it, potentially here one day actually, that customers only have space for around 5 apps on average on their phone. So let's be serious, ASOS is one. We've all got it. Premier delivery, £10 a year. You can't go wrong. Another one is PLT. PLT are doing amazing things right now, as well as Boohoo. So sort of to get that space of sort of that, to be one of those 5 is massive. So ensuring that you've got the ability to be in one of those, to actually have add to home screen, it's hugely important. And I'll give you one more metric, which is on the checkout actually. So obviously we need customers to check out, we need to make the money, we need to get that transaction. So with our PWA, customers who are getting to the checkout is up 30%, and customers even getting through it is up 10% as well. So some fantastic stats, it's all green. However, there is, it's never always great, there's always something. This is 2% of our traffic at the moment, which is not much. We want ideally it'd be 100, because if we make a lot more, but it's not. So our goal here is to actually increase this to 5%. With the amount of traffic and the increase in metrics that we're getting, that will be a big difference from a commercial point of view, and it will really make the senior directors smile. Hopefully give us a good Christmas party at the end of the year as well. So what is our goal to achieve that? We recently enabled push notifications on our website with Urban Airship. And they said that you guys have, obviously you go on Chrome, for example, and you get the pop-up saying allow or block. Allow or block what? Block. How can we stop that? So what we did is we implemented, like this one, a pre-pop-up for that pop-up that suggested why would I, pre-pop-up, pop-ups everywhere, but it works. So why should I add you to home screen? Why should I opt into notifications? So in the Urban Airship example, it was to tell you about latest trends, to tell you when sale drops. Even our store customers, they wait outside of the shops every 6 weeks. They know when sales come in. So, just give them a bit of context. Tell them why in a friendly, branded way. So it's not got this virusy, blocky pop-up, which works. So this will be going live tomorrow. I tried to get it live for today to get at least some results, but unfortunately pushing the creative team a bit too hard at the moment. So that is one of the ways that we're trying to achieve that increase in traffic. So what next? We've got the baseline PWA. We know it's working. We need to drive traffic. But what more can we do to make that experience better? So recently we teaming up with Womp Mobile, based out in Seattle. Great guys. If anyone needs a reference, let me know, because I really am a massive fan of them. And Madison, who's the CEO, is just fantastic. But they built AMP pages for George.com. So we had 25,000 AMP pages indexed in Google. The numbers were fantastic. But again, there's another issue. AMP's quite hard to track. It's quite new. So a lot of people are kind of debating how it works. And the way to measure this is before and after. With seasonality, so with Christmas, with back to school, your sales are doing this all year anyway, so it's hard to do a before and after for something that's, you don't have an A or a B, which I'll come on to. And the second thing is push notifications. So I've mentioned we've partnered up with Urban Airship to send push notifications out of our PWA as well. So for AMP, for accelerated mobile pages, our implementation was the first page from Google is cached by Google, so it's super fast. It loads in under 1 second. So site speed being one of the key metrics. Bounce rate, click-through rate, and pages per visit are the other 3 that we're focusing on. We get a lot of challenge from the business saying, well, why is conversion not in this? Why is revenue not in this? Because with AMP, we're not trying to achieve a conversion. We're trying to achieve a customer not leaving on the first page they see. If it's loading slow, I'll go somewhere else, or I'll go to my usual retailer. So those are the 4 key metrics that we are focusing on. So I get a lot. Is AMP even fast? What's the difference? I can't tell. You can tell. A lot of people just don't realise it because we're so used to a fast experience. But this is our canonical page loading on first view. So we're saying it's 5 seconds it takes for us to actually get to the final page. And then in the background, we've just got our tags firing, which I pet hate, but we'll get through it. And then this is our AMP page. So within 1 second, the page is already there, ready to interact with, super fast, super friendly. So that is the difference. And this is the image that I show to the stakeholders internally. So some stats, I love a stat. 93% of our AMP page is loaded in a second, whereas 93% of our canonical page is loaded in 4 seconds. So implementing AMP was a massive improvement for increasing that speed of our website, so our customers did engage more. Engage more so that it was 56% increase in pages per visit for customers who saw AMP in their journey. So it's a massive part of our PWA and our customer experience. We saw a 14% reduction in bounce rate on AMP pages from Google. So customers are actually coming in because it was loading so fast. They were then continuing that journey and carrying on shopping. Hopefully, after they've then browsed 5 pages, they will see our add to home screen prompt for the PWA. So it all links in quite nicely. And then click-through rate from Google actually increased 12% as well. You get the little AMP icon. I think customers are starting to feel what it is, knowing it's fast now, especially with the news industry sort of adopting it so fast. So yeah, those were some of our AMP metrics. And one of the next steps we want to do now is linking this with the PWA is PWAMP. So how do we make these speed benefits and easy, simple transitions fit into our PWA? So that's one of our main focuses for this year. And PWAMP, I like saying it. So push notifications, we can push without an app. People don't understand that actually you don't need a native app to send push notifications anymore. You can do this from the browser, of which a lot of browsers are on board. We have Safari, Firefox, Chrome, for example. So this is our pop-up that we showed on our website first. That was the sort of the browser pop-up that I showed. That it's not friendly because it doesn't really make sense, and it's going to be blocked a lot. So on the following categories, we actually showed this pop-up when customers visited to say, find out about new additions, latest trends, sales, special offers, because these are the things the customer wants to know about. So here are some stats, another stat. The opt-in rate that we planned in with our POC was 5%. That's kind of the base that they get from an opt-in rate on notifications on web, especially without the pop-up. But with our journey, we saw a 17% opt-in rate from our customers actually wanting to see this content, which we were kind of blew out of the water with. And again, click-through rate, you expect about 5% of customers to go through, which our friends on grocery, they see about 1%. But with our implementation, we saw 13.5% of customers actually click through these notifications from Chrome. Chrome was our sort of predominant, our browser. It's a great browser, Team Google. And then one thing that I found interesting was attributed engagement. So attributed engagement is, engagement is when a customer clicks the notification, goes through to your website, shops. But attributed engagement is a customer will shop on your website later on and not clicking through the notification. So it's you've sent it, they've seen it, they're carried on, they're on the bus, they're playing football, but George is kind of in that part of your brain that you don't realise is there, but it's there. So you're on your mind, and then later on the customers are actually coming back to george.com to shop. So quite an interesting metric that I found there. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. It was around the journey that we've been on george.com, trying to get the stakeholders on board, explaining what's the bigger picture, what's the main focus, and it's about closing the gap. It's about being part of that customer real estate on their phone, and that you don't need with an application. We've met with a few vendors around having a native application. It was a lot of resource, it's a lot of effort, a lot of time, but a PWA gives you everything you need that a native app does, and it's a lot simpler to do. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, man. That was amazing. Cool. So remember all your questions. I actually have loads of questions for you, Perry. So look forward to that in the Q&A. So now I'd like to welcome to the stage Sam from Developer Relations. So he works at Google, and he's going to talk about the future of PWAs. So.
Thank you. Got my clicker. Good.
Thanks very much. It was great to hear about Asda, actually. I'm actually working on guidance for e-commerce for our new site, web.dev. So please come up and talk to me about what you want from us, what we can do to help you, what guidance you're looking for your teams if you're working in e-commerce. Anyway, so yeah, I'm Sam, developer advocate at Google. This is kind of a whirlwind tour of the state of the web and how I think PWAs are a response to that. There's a bunch of links in this and stats and stuff. So yeah, I've put this online, and there's a bunch of other slides in there as well, which I won't show today, but hopefully some useful stuff there. So please follow along or have a look later. So yeah, we've all seen stuff like this. You know, there's been a revolution in the web since I started working at Google, like about 7 years ago. You know, the shift to mobile, and you know, the desktop hasn't gone away, but of course, increasing proportion of what we do is on mobile, and that's really driving the state of the web. You know, I started working on the web like you know, around this time, and just, I mean, the one thing I love about this, by the way, is updates monthly. That's not bad, is it? Anyway, but you know, since then, like, the web has got, you know, it's got more problematic, but you know, a lot more interesting as well. And I'd like to talk about how that's gone. I think one of the biggest things that happened most recently is the shift to getting back to mobile, thinking about mobile-only users. And this is really driving the state of the web, even in the US, where there's still a high number of desktop users, but this is even more so in other regions. You know, the desktop isn't going away, but we're seeing this huge shift and the direction of the web being propelled by what's going on mobile. This is my dad's first computer. This is where I kind of learnt to code. You know, it was big, and but it was really incapable. You know, you couldn't do much with it. It didn't even have a speaker. You know. What's interesting is that, you know, with the move to mobile, ironically, this kind of smaller form factor has driven the increase in capabilities. Not just that, but you know, in the old days, if you remember that far back, if you ever experienced it, like, software distribution was really expensive and unreliable and difficult. And ironically, this small form factor has driven a huge change in software distribution, which again is you know, a big driver, I think, behind progressive web apps. It's not just about capability. You can see here that you know, how mobile has kickstarted capabilities, and this is like across browsers. We're seeing increasingly APIs and, you know, other platform capabilities implemented across different, you know, a whole bunch of things. Not just APIs, but also like layout tools like CSS, Flex, and Grid, and so on, implemented across browsers. Increasingly, we're getting, you know, less APIs implemented in one browser and more APIs implemented in all the browsers. And this is obviously a huge deal and a huge shift in the way we build for the web and what we can do for the web. We're seeing across, you know, all the browsers support for what we think of as the core PWA APIs, in particular Service Worker. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but you know, we have support for Service Worker across all the major browsers now, which is great. And we have a bunch of interesting use cases for this, not least, you know, Google Search, which saw like a 2x boost implementing Service Worker for Chrome for Android, on Chrome for Android, which is great. Great to see that at scale. One thing that, you know, a colleague of mine, Paul Kinlan, has talked about is the headless web. The way that, you know, it's not just the web that's changed, it's the way we experience the web that's changing. We're experiencing the web in contexts where we're not even aware that we're using the web. An example here, The Guardian did a really nice election app, which really was just like notifications. You know, you never went to a web page. You didn't think about using the web. All the interactions happened there. I've seen a bunch of other stuff like that. And also people using the web as an embedded app format. So, you know, we're seeing that with games and so on and so on. Interesting stuff happening with companies like Rakuten and Toutiao and so on. But yeah, the web in ways that we're not used to, perhaps, you know, not in a page in a browser, which is kind of interesting. So this is all really good, but there's still some bad news. Yeah, just like we were hearing about the problems for Asda and other e-commerce sites. You know, of course, most parts of the world still have poor connectivity. This is London, and you know, we're all aware that connectivity is still not ubiquitous, and that's still a huge problem for the web, and we need to address that problem and be realistic about it. Lots of connections around the world are still 2G and will continue to be well into the 2020s. This is kind of interesting. This is like charts from the US. And the point of this is that there's still really poor connectivity, poor access to broadband for lots of people in lots of parts of the world. And, you know, poor access to reliable cell coverage as well. The problem in all that capability too is that, you know, we've seen stuff like this. We've seen this kind of, it reminds me a bit of the bad old days of DHTML, you know, like where there was a kind of lack of realism about real experiences for users. And we have this problem of loads of capability and sites doing lots and lots of stuff, but, you know, resulting in a poor experience, you know, slow load times for users. And we really need to address this. As we know, like mobile page weight has gone up despite everything. And, you know, this is not just a problem potentially for performance in terms of loading, but also for people where data cost is a big concern. And that's, you know, it's not just about bandwidth and connectivity. For some people, data cost is a huge issue as well. Yeah, this is a slide from my colleague Adi Osmani. Basically what it's showing is that expensive design, you know, devices are fast. Most people's devices are much slower. And most people, yeah, have these cheaper devices which are much slower to run JavaScript or whatever. And we need to be aware of that. And this is, again, a need to be realistic on the web. I did some scores recently using Lighthouse across top UK e-commerce sites. And what I discovered was that, you know, not surprisingly, we get pretty poor performance scores across most e-commerce sites. These actually match, to be honest, figures coming from the Chrome, you know, user experience reports for sites generally. But, you know, there's a clear opportunity here to do better. There's complexity in there too. Like, well, if these sites are so successful and they're performing badly according to these metrics, you know, maybe the metrics are wrong. So there's a whole nother question there too about what metrics we work with. And I think the stuff from ASDA about developing your own metrics and developing your own scoring for, you know, that you can share with the company is really, really crucial too. I think there's a general feeling too, I mean, I don't know if people agree with this, but just, you know, there's been a lot of grumbling, I think, over the last year or so that the web has just become too complex. There's too much to learn, there are too many options, and some frustration with that. And, you know, I think we've noticed that. I really like this, you know, this quote from Alex Russell at Google. He says, I mean, you know, he's pretty hardcore about this. He's pretty full on. But he says, JavaScript is the web's CO2. We need some of it, but too much puts the entire ecosystem at risk. It's kind of gloomy, but it's great. This is actually the gloomy part of my talk. I'm sorry. There is a happy ending. Anyway, which is this. You know, I think we are at this turning point for the web. Like, we can do better. And I think, you know, this is where PWA's come into this. I don't know if anyone remembers like the days of Web 2.0. You know, this is kind of after the .com bust, like around the turn of the millennium. And it's kind of most famous for stuff like this, you know, where we had like, ta-da, we had Ajax and these amazing apps with incredible capabilities. But, you know, I lived through that, and actually I think the most important thing that happened at that point was this kind of new realism where you suddenly actually had sites that worked, like simple sites that actually, where you could go and like buy something or do something or find something out. There was a kind of, you know, a shift with a focus on the user and building sites that were actually workable and realistic about the constraints of the medium. I think that's what we're seeing now. You know, and I think this is where PWA's come into this. So, you know, we've talked a bit about the capabilities of PWAs. Well, like what are they? It's been a really strong brand, by the way, as you can see with this fantastic chart. Incredible. I thought we hit like peak PWA when I saw in like the Grocer magazine, this guy saying PWAs are cool. I thought, wow, okay, that's really working. But yeah, as has been pointed out, there is a very specific checklist for what actually constitutes a PWA, and you know, some of this is you know, qualitative, but there are other things that, you know, you can measure that are actual specifics that you can implement and you can do to make sure that you're actually building a progressive web app. But really, it's about best practice for the web. I keep coming to this idea, like, it's almost like the brand has become so strong that people think of it as this kind of other thing. It's worth remembering, like, progressive web apps are, they're websites. And with that, they have a lot of the advantages of websites. They're at the end of a URL. You don't have this gatekeeper between your experience and your users. And all the good stuff that comes with, the ability to install and update without any experience of that for the user. Those things are completely invisible. We've seen this with Pinterest. Their PWA is like sub 200K, updates are sub 200K. Very similar story for Twitter. And this is a huge deal for trying to access like new audiences and people, who are much less likely to essentially or be able to install those big apps that require big upfront cost. Of course, the downside of the web has always been this lack of engagement. We've seen, of course, still seeing people spending a lot of time in apps and not on the web. There are some counter arguments to this. With the web, we get this fantastic reach, the ability to get to a much bigger audience. And I think it's worth remembering this too. When people are in native apps, an awful lot of what they're doing is like consuming media or just like using their usual messaging apps and social apps and so on. So it's not, in a sense, a like-for-like comparison. It's worth bearing that in mind. And of course, it's a winner-take-all scenario for apps. And it's really hard to break into that. So we're happy to have seen growth in PWA usage. We've seen fantastic stats on Chrome, which is really nice in the last year. And what we've come down to is like thinking about PWAs in terms of these kind of core sort of principles, really, that they should be fast and integrated and reliable and, of course, engaging, like fun to use, something you want to use. So I just want to go through those briefly and show some examples of this in action. We know that lots of users will abandon your site if it's slow to load, so we need to address that. If you haven't seen this site, it's really worth a look. LMA, h5.ele.me, Chinese site. They have like hundreds of millions of users representing like something like 1.5 million sites. They're interactive in 2 seconds. A brilliant site and exemplary, actually. I want to talk, really spend a bit of time talking about integration. And when I say that, I mean integration with the platform, with the device, and just giving users that experience of where they don't need to think about being on the web or think about being in an app. They just want to do something, and they need that to happen in this transparent way, ideally. So firstly, thinking about hardware integration. I'm going to give... This is a kind of whirlwind tour of APIs, new APIs, things that I think are exciting and powerful and interesting. So bear with me, because this is going to, I'm going to speed through this. I'll give you the link later so you can actually look at the code. So first up, thinking about, get this to work. All right, there we go. I think I've just lost a few things. So first up, we've got access to devices through, firstly through Bluetooth. And also through the, it's gone really slow, through the USB APIs as well, if it's going to move. And, okay, it's flipped on. Anyway, so also then we've got going the other way, like the ability to get access to sensors. Generic API, sensor API that gives us access to lots of different types of devices and new devices we haven't considered yet. It's also worth thinking about what are called fused sensors, which use input from lots of different types of sensors. So really powerful here, for example, to build this cool, compass. It's using like absolute orientation and magnetometer input and so on. Just a couple of things about platform integration. We've seen Add to Home Screen gives you the ability to make sure your users have your app right in front of them, and again, that integration with the device, with the platform. but also some other stuff. You know, we've always wanted to have this ability to select files from a web app, and Native Picker, really simple way to do that. But again, giving that seamless integration with the device. And again, like the ability to share content from a web app with any of the apps installed on the user's device. That's with the Native Share API. And again, great integration potential there. Going the other way, you can set a web app up as a share receiver. So in other words, a native app on the user's device can share with your web app. Use your web app to do something. Talk to Peter here about the Contacts API, which is, you know, he's partly responsible for designing and implementing, and yeah, which is on the way. And again, something people have been asking for a long time. Thinking again about using the platform, a lot of people have been asking for the ability to download files, like media files or whatever, to download stuff in the background and then consume it later. And yeah, we have APIs for this using background async and so on, and lots and lots of different use cases for that. Going the other way, I don't know if people have seen this, the presentation API gives you the ability to you know, for example, open a web page on a connected device, or even potentially use a Chromecast device. So the obvious use case there is with media, but you know, I don't know, plenty of other possibilities as well. Just briefly speaking about media, you know, of course, a huge proportion of what happens on the internet now is media. 70% of the bytes crossing the internet and rising. Especially, you know, increasingly in parts of the world where the internet is growing fastest. I really like this. This is like a classic case of what I think of as the headless web, you know, the media session API. The ability to control a web app, but without ever being on a web page. And this has also great integration with devices as well. And I really like that. Again, it's that experience of, you know, it's a web app, but, you know, you're not on a web page there. Likewise, lots of people have asked for picture-in-picture. This is just the ability to have a frameless video UI on the device. So, you know, you can watch something while you're using your phone, whatever. And we've now got that natively. If you're interested in media, I strongly recommend checking out this progressive web app, which does stuff like adaptive streaming, downloads, thumbnails, lots of other good stuff. Really well designed by Paul Lewis. I don't know if people know his stuff, but a really brilliant coder who's done a great job here. One thing I'd like to touch on briefly is, I think it's very powerful, is this concept of media streams. This is, you know, essentially the glue or the pipes or whatever we call it, of a metaphor, to tie together like different aspects of media. So if you think of like a stream coming from something like a camera or an incoming like WebRTC call, then you have a media stream out from that, and then you can connect that to something else, which might be like web audio, where you're doing some processing on the audio, or a canvas where you might tweak stuff, and then, you know, a media stream out from that can then go, for example, to be saved as a file or out to a new WebRTC call. So this concept of sort of nodes and pipes with media, I think, is incredibly powerful, and we're just starting to see some stuff with this. So of course we have get user media to get video stream from a camera. We also have now the ability to capture a stream from an element. The obvious use case for this is like stuff that's being displayed and rendered in a canvas. For example, a game, you could be streaming from a canvas to stream gameplay, stuff like that. Stuff more interesting than seeing a like teapot. Anyway, but huge potential there. Again, this concept of media streams. Image capture is allows you to take photos on a camera, and that goes nicely with the camera settings API, which allows you to control camera settings. We've just got in Chrome 72 screen sharing, which is really nice to see. It's been a while coming. There it is in action. Check it out. Really simple extension to get user media, really simple API. And then in order to save files from media streams, you can use Media Recorder. So again, this is powerful for saving media locally or uploading then media to a server somewhere. But again, a nice, simple, well-designed API, I think. I can get this to move. Oh, it's really stretched. It's getting there. Come on. Oh, here we go. Okay. Right. I think this has sort of jumped on a bit, but I just wanted to touch on, again, this is like hardware integration, the shape detection API, giving us access to barcode detection, face detection, text, detection like OCR, but integrated with hardware. So this is being done, in camera chips, in chips on devices. This is not software detection, which is again hugely powerful. Combine that with like 5G and real-time conversion of, for example, text in an image to actual text. And hang on, see if I can. Oh, it's just. I think it's because there's. Oh, there we go. Oh, cool. Thank you. And of course, I've got to touch on WebVR. Early implementation by my esteemed friend Paul worked pretty well, but we've gone beyond that. We're seeing, fantastic stuff with huge expressive power. And again, this is going to be a huge deal, I think, with 5G bringing, real-time VR possibilities. And but of course, that's on the web now with WebVR. One last thing here, still in progress, is the depth camera API. This gives you the ability to not just get an image, but also understand how far objects are from a camera. So again, lots of use cases for gaming and for virtual reality and so on. And that's been spec'd, and it's coming to browsers, which is great. A little touch on e-commerce. In terms of integration, e-commerce is huge on the web, of course, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and there's huge growth, especially in Asia Pacific, where the internet is growing fastest as well, and it's on the web. Retail compared to other sectors get less what we call app minutes. People spend a relatively high proportion of their time shopping on the web, which is interesting. And depending on the sites you look at, for some sites that's actually really dominant. Like the mobile web is really dominant for what people do, like where people actually do their shopping, spend their time. Of course, it's not all great, as we just heard. Like browsing does not equate to buying. We have this basic problem with much lower conversion rates on mobile. This is a huge problem. There's a huge deal for the web. The web is going mobile. People are not converting on mobile. People have good reasons for this. It's not all about failures, but we're seeing still high cart abandonment rates, and we're seeing here like a bunch of reasons why people do give up, which are related to UI UX. They're not because people have made decisions to complete a purchase on desktop or whatever. So that's something we really need to address with progressive web apps. If you do one thing, please, if you have not done this already, mark up your forms nicely. That just makes the biggest difference. This is the one biggest thing you can do to improve any site that uses forms. To enable autofill, autocomplete. But of course, what would be great is if we didn't have these forms at all. I don't know if have people looked at the payment request API? Yeah, really interesting. For those who don't know it, this is a web standard for interfaces for entering, shipping and ordering information. So users get like a standardized interface, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's worth checking that out, and you get this. There's a great integration with devices and the platform. Anyway, enough of this sort of new stuff. I just want to touch on reliability. If we're going to have apps on the home screen, we can't be seeing this. That's just no good. Service Worker is a response to that. It's a client-side proxy that enables you to handle requests for anything on the client side and do stuff like, for example, put files in a cache, and then if the device is offline, then the Service Worker proxy can handle that and go, hang on, let's get it from the cache, And then, when the device comes back online, let's update the cache when that happens. So this is obviously great for performance, but also, crucially, this is a big deal for reliability, and gives us, huge possibilities. Flipkart, the Indian retailer, did great work with this. Now, Service Worker is a low-level API. It's tough to code by hand. It's fine for simple use cases. That's not a big problem. But it can get really complex when you have more complex caching strategies. And for that, we have Workbox. If you haven't looked at Workbox, do. It's great. It's just gone into, I think there's a release candidate for version 4. And it's a great library. It makes it really simple to do those caching strategies. Check it out there, or you can follow this along later. And lastly, just a couple of words about engagement. This is like old style versus new style web apps. Pinterest, a really great case study for this. You can find it in the links I'll share later. And essentially what they did was, to improve performance. They improved performance, but that also led to big improvements in engagement. And do check out their case study about this. It's really interesting. All their rates improved, and what they found was that actually in the end that their web stuff was outperforming their native apps on a lot of their own metrics. One thing interesting, I was really interested to hear about the ASDA stuff. One thing Pinterest have done is develop this kind of corporate metric, which they call pinner wait time, which is like a metric that anyone in the company can understand, but that every project that they do is driven by this. So it's a combination of metrics that matter to them. So it's not just like asking people to have pages somehow load faster, or like very abstract metrics like that. It's a very specific set of numbers that mean something to all kinds of different people in the organization. This kind of stuff I think is crucial when you're trying to develop good apps, these kind of meaningful metrics. Lastly, just want to touch on WebAssembly, a whole bunch of options for essentially using other native code on the web. Obviously gives you access to existing code bases, but also huge potential for high performance apps. Great example here was AutoCAD, which has been around for years and is now available on the web, which is amazing. Even sort of stupid stuff like this, like a video editor, written in WebAssembly. That's just great. Unthinkable a few years ago. I think my favorite one actually was, did anyone see this? Windows 2000 running as a WebAssembly, what do you call it, app? Amazing. It's kind of the ultimate in recursion. Anyway, there it is. Yeah, this is like Windows 2000 running in a browser window. I love that. Anyway, so I've talked a lot about mobile, but of course desktop is not going away. It's a really nice example which you can look through the case study for with Spotify. You can install their app. This is on Chrome OS. But a really great seamless experience. Gets a top level place, just like any other app. But it's a progressive web app, which is really nice. And also, you can see here, it's like you're tied into all the session information that you get for a user in the browser, which is a huge deal. Lastly, we talked a little about trusted web activities. This is enabled in the most recent version of Chrome. This is essentially the ability to run a browser in an app and have that app that you can actually upload to the Play Store. It's full screen. You don't have to bundle resources like you do a hybrid app. It works like a progressive web app. Huge potential for this for people who really need a presence in app stores, I think. There are constraints for this, but that also gives us a lot of power, because this is what puts the trusted in the trusted web app, enables a whole bunch of interesting new use cases. Check it out there if you want to take a look at trusted web activities. And two other things I think are going to be huge on the web: AI and voice. Where's the web in an era of voice? Particularly, thinking about regions, parts of the world where there are high levels of illiteracy, and text usage is really difficult. AI is going big in India and other regions, which traditionally have, where it's been very difficult to interact with computers. And this is a huge deal for the web. And I'm really interested to see where this goes. Where is the web on these like assistants, but other devices using AI? And also, just ignore the hype about 5G. 5G is really coming in the next couple of years to the UK and lots of other parts of the world. The promise is download an entire HD movie in less than 10 seconds, but also very low latency. And this is going to completely change what people expect from the web and what people get used to on the web in terms of experiences. So we really need to be prepared for this. And lastly, the web is still kind of centralized, yeah? And I think we're going to see as the center of gravity of the web is, move towards Asia and other regions where there's a lack of local content. I think we're going to see more local content, more local apps, and that's going to change the way the web works. And we're going to see some really interesting stuff come from that. We've come a long way from these bloody floppy disks. I remember those. So if you're wondering how to get started, you do all this stuff. But seriously, I wrote a guide on how to get started with an existing website and what to look at and how to get that low-hanging fruit sorted out. When you've done that, you remember all this stuff you're supposed to keep on top of. It's really hard. Well, we've got training. We're just actually in the process of updating this, which is nice. So there's essentially classroom materials there. So videos and slides and code labs and text to go with it. And there's certification that goes with this. So really handy for working with your teams. If you have new people on a team or you're trying to bring someone up to speed, that's a great way to do it. I keep a list of lots and lots of PWA resources at that URL. Hope some of that's useful. Feel free to make suggestions. And of course, we just opened this new site, web.dev, which has lots of good guidance and code labs and so on. And the old developers.google.com/web, which also has lots of really great case studies. That's the URL for these slides. Thank you so much. I know I've gone way over time, but anyway, thanks.
Thank you very much.